Incredible journey. Clint overcomes Critic's brutal attack to win Best Director. You won't believe what happens next. Clint Wheeler's heart sank as he finished reading the Critic's scathing review. The words felt like a noose tightening around his neck, condemning his labor of love to an unceremonious fate. In the sleepy Midwestern town where he grew up, creativity had always been intertwined with safety and survival. He had fought hard to break free from that mold, only to face public ridicule. The patrons of Mel's Diner, usually a sanctuary buzzing with the scent of frying eggs, now felt like a jury, passing quiet judgment on his failure. Tired eyes flickered towards him, their unwelcome glances heavy with disbelief. Hadn't he just been the dreamer amongst them? The one who dared to tell their stories? Guilt gnawed at him. Was he not only letting himself down but also the legacy of his father and mother? His father worked tirelessly in the factory, the sweat of his brow unyielding, while his mother taught students to embrace the power of narrative. Clint had envisioned his film speaking to that very struggle, a mouthpiece for those dreams buried deep by practical choices. Now, he could almost hear their voices echoing in his mind. Don't let fear dictate your path. But fear surrounded him like smoke, tendrils tightening around his confidence with every judgmental whisper and skeptical eye. As he drowned in that sea of inadequacy, Clint stumbled across an old film series at the town library. There in the depths of that dusty room he met Edith, a retired director with silver hair flowing in waves of forgotten glory. Her stories were gems, recounting moments when she too faced a wall of criticism. With every word, her compassionate gaze rekindled the flicker of determination within him. She saw in him the potential he feared had vanished, challenged him to pour every ounce of his spirit into a new film, a piece that could breathe life back into his shattered dreams. But then the moral dilemma seeped in. Each day spent reviving his artistic voice felt like a battle between integrity and survival. Should he seek backing from financiers eager to mold his narrative into something palatable for the masses, or should he sacrifice those opportunities and stay true to his roots? The tension swelled like an impending storm, confidence battling insecurity with every scene he penned. He saw the lure of commercial viability shining bright, but it became increasingly clear that the choice wasn't just about him. It was about a community of troubled dreamers looking for representation. Their hopes weighed heavily on him, shaking the foundations of his resolve. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. The film was complete, and the premiere date loomed ominously. Anxiety twisted in his gut as the theater filled with familiar faces. Friends, critics, the very ones who wielded the power to define his career. Among them sat the critic who'd hurled words like stones, and Clint's muscles tensed involuntarily. This was it. He was not merely presenting a film, but confronting the weight of every doubt, every shred of hope. The lights dimmed, and each flicker on the screen beckoned a shadow of uncertainty. Would he stand tall against the very opinions that sought to suffocate him? Doubts rushed like flickering frames, each one reminding him that this was not just a fight for his sanity, but an echo of every voiceless specter that had whispered their unsung stories for far too long. The film unfolded, a tapestry woven with threads of triumphs and tribulations. Clint's heart raced as he watched the audience's reaction, their faces lit by flickering images on the screen. He absorbed their smiles, their frowns, even the subtle shifts of discomfort. This was a litmus test not just for his filmmaking but for his very essence, and the stakes loomed larger than ever before. For every engaged glance, doubts struggled for control, each moment echoing the critic's harsh assertions. Halfway through, an uncomfortable silence enveloped the crowd during a pivotal scene where his protagonist grappled with the same fears that now resided in Clint's chest. This was the heartbeat of his film, a raw reflection of vulnerability. As the protagonist's emotional crescendo filled the theater, Clint felt a belonging swell within him, A kinship between artist and audience had begun to form, even as remnants of skepticism lingered. Was he seen? Did they really feel that connection? Or were the whispers of the past too powerful to silence? As the credits began to roll, a blend of anxiety and anticipation surged through him. Would the audience rise in applause, or would it feel like a final condemnation? He clenched his hands, the palpable tension echoing in the hollow of his chest. The lights brightened. He braced himself, half anticipating the droning presence of silence for which he had prepared mentally. Instead, applause erupted, hesitant at first but quickly swelling into a wave of fervor. Clint's breath hitched as he locked eyes with familiar faces, friends, even the ones who had doubted him. Recognition flared in their expressions. Something deep within ignited. He stepped forward to take the stage, the weight of every negative review pressing against his back. Yet every clap of approval buoyed his step. As he spoke, each word anchored him deeper into a newfound purpose. "This film isn't just mine, it's ours," he exclaimed, grasping at the energy swirling around him, hoping to channel it into a rallying point for all dreamers banned by doubt. "This story reflects us all, our struggles, our desires, our voices that cry out to be heard." To his surprise, real passion bubbled up in the faces of those he yearned to connect with. Edith's genuine smile, glimmering with pride like a lighthouse in a storm, fueled his conviction. But amidst the clamor of acceptance, something dark began to flicker in the back of his mind: self-doubt. He had risked everything to stay true to his roots, but now that he felt embraced, questions crashed around him. How would he keep the integrity of his art in the face of commercial success? In the days that followed, he found solace in solitude, but it was a misunderstanding of solitude that felt like a chain rather than a sanctuary. He pored over notes, determined to explore the architecture of his newfound ethos, but still, a part of him feared a compromise, a dilation of his original vision to fit the expectations of an eager market. Then came the call from a prominent producer, intrigued by Clint's latest undertaking. Instead of excitement, unease gripped him. Was he ready to step into that realm, or would it lure him away from the authentic voice that resonated so deeply? With trembling hands, he leaned back in his chair, seeking clarity, yet feeling the weight of expectation tightening once more. The moment had arrived, one that demanded self-exploration and careful navigation. A decision loomed before him, and he could already sense its implications. Could he sustain his artistic vision while drawing resources from a world that thrived on profit? The tension in his chest grew. Perhaps the answer lay not in negotiation but in redefine. Could he merge ambition with authenticity? He knew he stood on the precipice of something defining, but clarity remained elusive. What would he ultimately choose? As the shadows of doubt slinked closer, Clint faced a reality he hadn't anticipated. The time had come to face not just the industry, but himself. A week had slipped by since the audience's verdict rang in his ears, their applause still a whisper of something he never fully believed he deserved. Clint found himself pacing the dimly lit corners of his small apartment, papers strewn about like autumn leaves after a storm, each one a reminder of the projects he had once discarded. A new producer had shown interest. His immediate reaction had been fear, but now it simmered into something like curiosity. He stared at the unanswered emails, the digital beckoning of opportunity. Each message was both enticing and daunting. True, this producer placed Clint's work on a pedestal, but what implications did that come with? What strings might be attached? As he mulled over the possibilities, he felt an itch at the back of his mind, like a lingering question he didn't know how to articulate. Could he allow himself to be seen as an artist on the rise? Or was he destined to remain in the shadows of self-doubt, forever doubting his authenticity? Even the notion of meeting this producer filled him with anxiety, each mental image of their conversation tainted by the specter of his perceived inadequacies. Would he stumble on his words or fail to make a compelling case for his vision? Amidst this noise, he found a thread of clarity. Rather than succumbing to self-sabotage, what if he embraced his unique narrative as his armor? Striding into that meeting with a well-honed vision could potentially transform his anxiety into confidence. Yet, the fear of dilution haunted him, a voice frosted with the specters of past failures whispering that maybe he would indeed compromise for fame, fortune, some semblance of success. As the day of the meeting approached, Clint envisioned himself articulating his film's core message with precision and passion. He imagined a dialogue where he could elevate his vision over the clattering distractions of commercial interests. Practice sessions morphed from rehearsals into mini self-iterations, where he meticulously crafted pitches that honored both his artistic integrity and the practical world of cinema. Each articulation strengthened his resolve, building a mental barricade against the encroaching doubts. On the day of the meeting, dressed simply but intentionally, Clint approached the sleek office building that housed the producer's empire. The facade felt daunting, unyielding as a cliff face, but within him roared a determination he hadn't known he possessed until now. As he stepped into the minimalist office, the sleekness of the interior reflected both ambition and sterile professionalism. The producer, an imposing figure of industry prestige, greeted him with a smile that felt as calculated as it was cordial. "Clint, welcome. I've been looking forward to this," the producer said, gesturing toward a sleek chair. But Clint didn't want to sit just yet. He needed to speak, to assert not just his ideas but his truth. "Thank you for this opportunity. I believe we have the chance to create something impactful, something that resonates beyond the surface." The words tumbled out with a fervor that both surprised and emboldened him. As their discussion unfolded, he felt the nervous flutter transform into a steady pulse of conviction. The producer listened, respect echoing in the creases of his brow. Questions arose, but they were not the barbs Clint anticipated. Each query invited him to dive deeper into his ethos. Yet as the conversation progressed, a chilling realization began to seep into his consciousness. The producer's enthusiasm was palpable, yet so too was the subtle hint of expectation, a whisper that perhaps money mattered more than meaning. Clint noticed the tension creeping back into his mind, wrestling with his original fervor for authenticity against the lure of easy validation. Would he leave this meeting with his vision intact, or merely as another cog in a fear-driven machine? As the interview drew to a close, the likely path ahead was far from clear. Clint gathered his notes, aware that he had merely scratched the surface of an inner conflict yet unresolved. Back in the stark illumination of the producer's office, Clint understood his journey was only beginning. The era of self-discovery, of blending ambition with authenticity, lay ahead. The stakes had escalated. How would he navigate this fragile balance? One pressing thought rattled in his mind. If he didn't make clear choices soon, would he lose himself altogether? A pivotal choice loomed closer, and for the first time, he realized the magnitude of both risk and possibility waiting just beyond the horizon. What awaited him as the next step in this transformative journey? Clint emerged from the producer's office, the air feeling charged with unresolved questions. The elevator doors slid shut behind him, sealing in the glossy walls of ambition and expectation. He took a deep breath, the sterile scent of the lobby weighed down his hopes, mingling with a peculiar sense of exhilaration. He had taken a step, an unequivocal step into a future that held both promise and peril. As he wandered the streets, shadows of self-doubt resumed their haunting over his newfound confidence. Time and again, he replayed the meeting in his mind, dissecting each moment like a film reel. Had he really articulated his vision, or had he merely danced around the edges of what he craved? The producer's nods felt like both validation and a subtle warning. It was clear that he saw potential in Clint. But would that potential serve his art, or simply line someone else's pockets? His phone buzzed, jolting him from introspection. An email notification, a reply from the producer. The words seemed to pulse against the screen, brimming with the promise of collaboration yet shrouded with veiled undertones. "I'd like to discuss next steps. Let's set up another meeting." The prospect of another encounter sent a shiver of anticipation mixed with dread coursing through him. Clint's thoughts spiraled. Was he ready to take this leap? Each decision felt like a fork in the road, and the weight of his previous mistakes loomed large. The ache of compromise pinching at his soul was palpable. In the shadows of each calculated success he'd seen, He'd also witnessed the hollow echoes left behind when authenticity was sacrificed on the altar of profit. Days passed and Clint oscillated between hope and despair, bursting with ideas but plagued by endless nighttime doubts. He revisited his discarded projects, the scripts that represented different facets of his vision and past failures. Flipping through pages, he unearthed voices he'd long silenced, courageous narratives begging for life on screen, artistic pursuits worthy of risk-taking. One evening, as he wrestled with decisions, an uncharacteristic idea clawed its way into his mind. The notion of a small event where he would screen the rejected pieces, share behind-the-scenes stories, and gather feedback from friends and local filmmakers. The thought was liberating, a way to breathe life into his visions without the pressure of commercial viability. Perhaps this could be the catalyst he needed to reconnect with the essence of his creativity. But a dark whisper crept into his thoughts, and he found himself questioning the practicality of such a venture. What if it flopped? What if this was merely another exercise in failure? Yet, within that doubt lurked an undeniable itch for authenticity, an unquenched thirst for validation that came from within rather than external applause. On the night of the screening, the intimate venue glowed with dim blue lighting, a contrasting warmth against Clint's throat-tightening anxiety. Faces both familiar and new filled the seats, each one a reminder of the risks he faced. As he introduced the films, his voice resonated with conviction. The stories were rich with honesty and raw emotion, resonating not with glitz but with sincerity. With each short film he presented, Clint felt a rebirth of passion. He listened to the audience's reactions, their laughter and silence a guidepost for his next steps. It affirmed what he already knew deep in his bones. These narratives, the ones delivering raw authenticity, held power. As the evening concluded, whispers of appreciation and critiques echoed throughout the space. Clint found himself in animated discussions, invigorated and challenged in equal measure. Yet as he walked away from the event, a nagging realization crept in. He had stumbled upon a significant truth about himself. He operated best in spaces where creativity was not stifled by expectation. That pivotal screening opened the door to deeper conversations, sparking ideas and collaborations that gave him hope. But that space of creativity was not without its own complications. Just as he was beginning to feel a spark of true potential, he received a text that shook the foundations of his newfound confidence. The producer had sent a cryptic message, suggesting that he was bringing in someone whose vision was very different from his own. Clint's heart raced. Was the very authenticity he began to reclaim about to be threatened once again? Before he could fully digest the implications of that text, another familiar name appeared on his phone screen. It was an old rival from film school, rekindling old wounds. Now he faced a pivotal crossroads. Would he stand firm in his artistic vision, or would he bend once more to external pressures? The stakes were no longer just personal, but professional, and the line between integrity and success was razor thin. The next steps he took could very well define not only his career but his identity as a filmmaker. What he didn't yet know was how deeply intertwined his past rival and the producer's new partnership would unravel everything he believed about his journey thus far. Clint stared at the screen, the message from the producer replaying in his mind like a sinister soundtrack. The implication of a different vision sent shudders through him. He had clawed his way back to a creative space, only to find it threatened by the ghost of his past, a rival whose ambition often overshadowed talent. The familiar churn of anxiety began to twist in his stomach. As he paced his small apartment, the gravity of the situation collided with his recent triumph. Each echo of laughter from the screening night contrasted sharply with the weight of expectation hanging heavy over him. He pulled out a notebook filled with sketches and ideas, the remnants of his creative spark. This was supposed to be his moment, yet now he felt it slipping through his fingers. He needed to confront both the producer and his rival, not in a physical sense but head-on, engaging with the truths they both represented in his life. Clint scribbled outlines for potential new narratives, each concept emerging as a shield to protect his vision against outside attacks. Coincidentally, one piece caught his attention, a speculative script about filmmakers navigating a treacherous industry. It was deceptively autobiographical and felt like the perfect avenue to funnel his frustrations. However, the voice of doubt remained. What if this was simply a retreat from the challenge ahead? What if he was merely circling back to traditional safety nets instead of forging his path? The urgency was palpable. The text loomed large, and the very act of passivity now felt paralyzing. Determined, Clint set his sights on working with his newfound collaborators. They shared a similar ethos, invigorated by the authenticity he held dear. Late-night brainstorming sessions unfolded in cafes where they mingled passion with practicality. Each meeting peeled back layers of self-doubt, revealing a network of creatives willing to challenge conventions. They discussed narratives that defied the formulaic expectations imposed by producers. And in those discussions, Clint rediscovered purpose. Yet each session was tainted with the underlying threat of his old rival. It was impossible to ignore the notifications that flashed on his phone, reports of their growing partnership with potential backers. Clint gritted his teeth, refusing to be consumed by jealousy. He had to channel that energy into something constructive. Instead of comparing himself to another's journey, he would focus on molding his own narrative. The veil of that rivalry momentarily lifted as a breakthrough surfaced. One evening, while brainstorming, Clint dropped his guard and shared personal stories of his struggles as a filmmaker. Fear and vulnerability transformed the room, igniting ideas that rang true to their collective experience. Connections solidified and strategies emerged as the group coalesced around a shared drive. Their partnership promised to be a bastion of independence and creativity. Days turned into buoyant weeks as ideas flourished. Clint entered the twilight of each day with renewed vigor, the shadows of doubt receding. Yet, as he reviewed a draft of the script late one night, anxiety crept back. The enormity of presenting to the producer, particularly with the rival's influence now lingering in the edges of his mind, became almost unbearable. Each sentence he penned felt weighted, as if the act of creation was being scrutinized by an unseen jury. His heart raced as he finally hit send, delivering the draft to the producer. The potential for critique mixed with a burning desire for validation. It wasn't just about the approval of an industry gatekeeper, but rather a question of identity. Who was he as a creator if he failed once again? As the clock ticked down to the time the producer had arranged for their discussion, Clint's thoughts spiraled. Would he walk into that meeting fortified by his growth and collaboration, or falter under the pressure of his rival's looming specter? With a composed breath, he silently created a manifesto of intentions for that pivotal meeting. The lines were drawn, and now he had to enter the battlefield of creativity, where art and ambition clashed. He needed to define his vision, stake his claim, and determine whether the price of success was worth his artistic authenticity. The moment of confrontation loomed, and the only path forward was riddled with uncertainty. But Clint was about to uncover the strength he didn't know he possessed, if only he was willing to embrace the chaos ahead. The door swung open, and he prepared to step into a world where every decision could alter the landscape of his future. How far was he willing to go to defend his vision? Clint stepped into the producer's office, a cavernous space lined with awards and accolades, a testament to ideals he desperately wanted to achieve. The weight of the room felt heavier than even his own expectations. He steadied himself, focusing on the pulse of his heart. Today was more than just a meeting, it was a reckoning. With his script in hand, he took note of the impeccably dressed producer across the table, someone who embodied the industry's pressures and expectations. Clint reminded himself that he was not there simply to pander. He had poured his soul into the script, every line an embodiment of his journey. As he sat down, the initial small talk felt suffocating, a veil over the critical conversation that loomed just beneath the surface. Then, without preamble, the producer dove in. "Clint, I have to say my initial impression is promising, but..." There it was, the hesitation, the half-hearted praise. Clint felt the tightness in his chest as he mentally braced for whatever followed. "It seems a bit too personal, don't you think? Audiences are looking for escapism, not a mirror reflecting your struggles." Those words landed like a gut punch. Clint fought back the urge to defend himself immediately, knowledge from his recent workshops with collaborators flickering in his mind. Art can't always be an escape. Sometimes it's about confronting reality, he managed to say, measuring his voice but feeling the tremor underneath. Reality is one thing, making it palatable is another, the producer countered, crossing his arms as if shutting the door on Clint's argument. Have you thought about injecting more commercial elements? Clint felt the heat crawling up his neck. The clash between his vision and the commercial mold was palpable. Here was the challenge: to articulate the core of his narrative without losing its raw essence. He had to confront not just the producer's doubts, but his own fear of compromising his artistic integrity. What if I told you that this isn't just a film for my catharsis? Clint pressed, feeling the sense of urgency within him grow. It's a narrative that resonates with countless filmmakers struggling in this industry. It's about the real choices we make. A flicker of intrigue crossed the producer's expression, but Clint needed to push harder. It's not about escapism. It's about recognition, the confrontation of our failures and triumphs. It's a celebration of what it means to create despite the chaos. I want to be honest. The producer leaned back slightly, the imposing authority shifting just a notch. Honesty can indeed be compelling, but potential funders might not see it that way. What guarantees do you have that this approach resonates? Clint's mind raced. This was the moment he had trained for, both alone in his apartment and with his collaborators. I don't need guarantees. I seek authenticity. If I lose that, then who am I as a storyteller? The emotion underlying his words revealed itself. The reality of his journey laid bare, his losses, his doubts, everything that shaped him. The silence that followed felt infinite, each second stretching as Clint prepared for the possible rejection. But then the producer cleared his throat, eyes glimmering with a hint of curiosity. You're different from the others, Clint. Most would simply relent at this point. Taking a breath, Clint locked eyes with the producer. Tell me then, what do you see in the chaos? A glimmer of respect crossed the producer's face. The moment was transformative, not for the producer's approval but for Clint's own burgeoning confidence. He had confronted the barriers of his past, his rival, the doubt, the producer's skepticism, and defended his vision on his own terms. Yet in the back of his mind, the competitive specter of his old rival loomed, waiting to seize any opportunity for vindication. Clint wasn't merely defending himself anymore. He was rewriting the narrative in real time. As the meeting drew to a close, Clint left the producer's office, charged with a sense of possibility, but also uncertainty. He had faced the pressure head-on, but now needed to translate that first victory into tangible results. His next steps would require a calculated strategy, adjusting the script but staying true to its core, presenting it to producers who could truly appreciate it, and perhaps even confronting his rival in a way that would define not only his career, but also his identity. As he stepped onto the bustling streets, Clint could feel the electric pulse of the industry again, a double-edged sword of anxiety and determination. A thought ignited within him. Revisions could bring clarity, but so could embracing confrontation, not just with the industry but with himself. How would he refine his voice amidst the illusions of success and the ghosts of the past? The answers lay ahead, waiting to be discovered. The clang of the office door behind Clint felt almost ceremonial, sealing away the weight of the producer's scrutinizing gaze. As he navigated through the streets, the city buzzed with life, an unrelenting rhythm that matched the thrum of his determination. Past the blending lights and cacophony of voices, Clint engaged in a swirling internal dialogue, dissecting every word exchanged in that sterile office. Had he really registered his own capabilities? Or had he merely responded from defense? It was time to shift the approach. There was a feisty resolve brewing within him, a simmering declaration that he had something vital to contribute, something that could not only capture audiences but also align with his essence. He arrived at a cafe, a local haunt where he often scribbled notes and plotted ideas. Settling into a corner table, he laid out his script, the familiar sight sparking a swirl of emotions. Would his revision morph into a commercial success that did justice to the integrity of his narrative? Authenticity danced mockingly at the edges of his thoughts, and he could not shake the doubt that threatened to seep in. As he opened the script, the words greeted him like old friends, yet they now demanded re-examination. With each line he read, a confrontation ensued. Could he retailor without utterly transforming? The memory of the producer's eyes, flickering with intrigue, urged him to tread carefully yet boldly. He knew the intricacies of his story. It was laced with a pulse reflective of his life's chaotic tapestry. Could he still infuse that core while embedding the elements that might draw commercial attention? As he reached for a pen, Clint felt the thrill of strategizing, redefining his artistic vision while considering the audience's yearning for connection. It was not just about what they wanted. It was about leading them to the deeper truth he believed in. His mind sparked with possibilities. What if he tangled commercial threads within his narrative without sacrificing its heart? He began jotting down notes, layers of character development that could veer toward relatability, moments of vulnerability that would resonate with those who had faced the industry's daunting challenges. Each idea flowed with rapid urgency. They were not compromises but enhancements that could drive the original intention home. Yet, that lurking specter, his rival, loomed just outside the fringes of his thoughts. The last encounter haunted him, and Clint had to wrestle with the idea that any triumph could be overshadowed by another's prowess. A fresh wave of determination surged within. How could he confront this rival and elevate his own game simultaneously? It was a moral cringe. He had to bear the burden of believing in himself, especially when others sought to elevate their own stature through discrediting his. Clint slipped into a contemplative silence, wrestling with the duality of climbing a steep mountain while encouraging others to step beside him on that journey. This was his dilemma. With each revision, he could reinforce his commitment to artistry, while simultaneously finding a path to success that didn't diminish others' value. The cafe began to buzz with the lunchtime rush, distracting yet invigorating. Clint quickly made a mental note of the adjustments needed: more shared struggles, infectious camaraderie within chaos. These would reflect not only his journey, but underscore the shared struggles in art. As he gathered his belongings, his phone buzzed to life. A text from an unexpected name flashed on the screen. An old workshop colleague, asking if he wanted to co-write a piece. Suspicion intertwined with intrigue. Collaboration could either dilute his vision or amplify it beyond his imagination. He hesitated, torn between isolation and potential partnership. What if this was an opportunity? An avenue to confront the rival through shared creativity? The answer remained precarious, yet a thrill thrummed through him. The moment for decision had arrived. Would he embrace collaboration or forge ahead alone? Uncertainties loomed large, but one truth hovered above the chaos. He was ready to redefine his path. The stakes were high, and the fight was just beginning. Clint stepped onto the sidewalk, the city bustling around him, alive and echoing with possibility. He was on the brink of something new, and every decision would sharpen the knife that defined him. The pulse of his heart quickened at the thought. It was time to face the questions that could shake the very foundations of his journey. Would he seize the opportunity, or would fear dictate his future? As Clint walked through the thrumming city, the vibrations of his surroundings seemed to mirror the cadence of his thoughts. The text from his old colleague replayed in his mind like a persistent melody. The idea of collaboration strummed a nerve within him, oscillating between anxiety and excitement. As much as he craved autonomy within his creative process, the prospect of joining forces tugged at a deeper yearning for connection and shared purpose that he had long suppressed. He found himself wandering without direction, his feet guiding him instinctively toward the park where he had spent countless hours thinking, dreaming, and grappling with his ambitions. The familiar trees embraced him, their leaves whispering encouragement in the breeze. As he sank onto a bench, the chaos of the cafe faded, leaving him cocooned in the quiet moment. Clint pulled out his phone, the screen bright like a beacon in the subdued light. The message from his colleague, a co-writer with whom he'd shared a turbulent yet transformative workshop, felt like an olive branch extended across a chasm of self-doubt. He tapped at the screen, fingers hovering over the keyboard composing a reply. Each sentence held potential, a thread of possibility that could weave into something larger than himself. "Let's discuss ideas," he typed, heart pounding with every keystroke. This small commitment felt monumental, an act of vulnerability, an acknowledgement that he did not have to navigate this path alone. The anticipation prickled at the back of his mind. What if they connected, bounced ideas off each other, and unearthed something remarkable? But lurking beneath that excitement was the nagging concern of losing his vision. What if their collaboration melted away the unique essence he had fought to craft? The fear was almost palpable, a physical weight dragging at him. Clint squeezed his eyes shut, inhaling deeply, knowing he had to wrestle with these conflicting emotions, the fear of dilution versus the desire for growth. As if to fuel his internal conflict, an image of his rival emerged unbidden, casting a shadow over his burgeoning optimism. He could picture him, confident and sharp, exuding an aura of superiority that had always elicited a mixture of admiration and loathing in Clint. Was partnering up with his former colleague a path to overshadowing that rivalry, or merely setting himself up for a painful comparison? Did collaborating mean diluting his identity, or could it be a catalyst for igniting his real potential? Voices nearby pulled him back to the present. A group of aspiring artists debated animatedly about the latest trends in screenwriting, their excitement infectious. Clint felt the spark of inspiration flicker to life once more. He couldn't ignore what this collective energy represented. Art flourished in the spaces shared with others. Stories were meant to intertwine, to evolve alongside collaborators. Resolutely, he pushed aside the intertwined fears. What if he could channel them instead? What if the pressure brought forth clarity rather than confusion? A partnership held the possibility of exploring uncharted territories of creativity that he might never encounter alone. With renewed vigor, Clint stood up, the resolve hardening in his chest. This was not just about his own journey to success. It was also about contributing to a tapestry of stories that reflected the nuances of human experience. He approached the nearest tree, the bark rough against his fingertips as if grounding him in this moment of clarity. He was not backing down from his vision, he was broadening it. This instinctual shift in perspective illuminated paths he hadn't considered before, insights buried deep within him. As he strolled back toward his apartment, Clint reached for his phone again. His heart raced while he typed, sending the message to his colleague that they should meet later that week to brainstorm ideas. He felt the weight of anticipation settle comfortably upon him. Each step toward his building seemed lighter, infused with the buoyancy of possibility. He was ready to embrace the unknown, armed with the awareness that every decision he made could either affirm his vision or challenge him to grow beyond it. The moment felt electric, the air thick with potential, but an unsettling thought lingered. What if his rival found out about his collaboration? Clint stepped into his apartment, closing the door behind him. This was just the beginning, the foundation of what could be a remarkable venture, but confrontation loomed dangerously in the distance. As he contemplated the road ahead, a new question echoed within him. Was he ready for whatever storm might come his way? The following days unfolded at a frenetic pace. Clint felt the electric tension coiling within him like a spring, ready to release. His enthusiasm surged as the meeting with his colleague drew closer, yet the specter of doubt didn't linger far behind. He threw himself into work, meticulously refining his own script in preparation for their joint brainstorming session. The process of sculpting individual ideas into something greater took on a new rhythm. He found himself jotting down notes, sketching concepts, and inviting fresh perspectives into his creative circle. But with each keystroke, that familiar shadow crept back into his thoughts. Images of his rival flashed through his mind, a relentless reminder of the insecurities that had plagued him for years. The thought of facing potential criticism, especially from someone who had often been a point of comparison, gnawed at him. Could he withstand the judgments that might rain down if his project failed? Was he ready to bear the weight of others' expectations, particularly when they saw him as the underdog in this collaboration? The morning of the meeting arrived with an undercurrent of dread, momentarily overshadowing his excitement. Clint donned the carefully chosen outfit that he believed signified professionalism, yet allowed a glimpse of his artistic flair. Standing before the mirror, he practiced smiles that didn't reach his eyes, muttering affirmations that felt hollow. He had spent far too long gauging his worth through the prism of others, particularly this rival of his. Today, he resolved, would mark a departure from that cycle. At the cafe where they chose to meet, the atmosphere buzzed, several tables occupied by animated conversations surrounding the craft of storytelling. Instinctively, his heart synced with the lively chatter, like a metronome finding its beat amidst a cacophony. When his colleague arrived, the familiar warmth of their shared history enveloped him. As they settled into a cozy corner booth, Clint felt something shift within him. Their conversation cascaded over ideas, fresh, unpolished, yet animated like fireflies in the night. For every concern Clint voiced about losing his vision, his colleague countered with insights that reframed the narrative. This dynamic ignited a spark deep within him, a realization that collaboration was not about surrendering individuality, but rather an exhilarating opportunity to expand boundaries. By the time their initial brainstorming session wound down, Clint looked at the scribbled notes before him like a treasure map, guiding him toward uncharted territories of creativity. Ideas flowed freely, morphing and evolving through their exchange, yet an unsettling sense of vulnerability remained. As they wrapped up, Clint knew he would have to confront the rival that loomed in the recesses of his mind. The question remained: would he allow that rivalry to stifle his newfound collaboration? That gathering storm of insecurity stood in stark contrast to the bright possibilities unraveled in the cafe. Returning to his apartment, he felt invigorated yet anxious. He could already anticipate the whispers of doubt creeping in, but he was determined to face them head-on. The next step loomed large, demanding a grace he was unsure he possessed. Would he share their progress with his rival? Or would he protect this delicate formation of creativity from potential sabotage? Late that night, under the soft glow of his desk lamp, Clint opened his laptop and began to craft a message to his rival. Every word felt like a negotiation with the darkness that had shadowed him for years. The cursor blinked, an incessant reminder that this was a moment of truth, a line in the sand of his professional self. As he typed, reflection turned into revelation. With each letter, Clint felt the shift in his psyche. This wasn't just a response, but a step toward reclaiming his narrative. He was not merely defined by comparisons. He was the author of his destiny. But just as he prepared to hit send, an unexpected noise caught his attention. His phone buzzed against the table. It was a message from his colleague, containing an intriguing suggestion that could fundamentally alter their direction. Clint felt his heart race, pulses of excitement mingling with a rising sense of urgency. Could this be the turning point he had been striving for? Or would it push him further into the labyrinth of conflict he was still trying to navigate? He hesitated, finger hovering over the keyboard, contemplating what lay ahead. The future felt precarious yet tantalizingly close. What waited on the other side of this choice? A collaboration that could set him on a new trajectory, or a revelation that might force him back into the shadows? The pathway ahead seemed veiled in fog, but clarity beckoned him to take the leap. Would he embrace the untamed possibilities, or would he succumb to the compare and contrast game that had haunted his journey? Clint sat at his desk, heart pounding, grappling with the weight of possibilities unfurling before him. He hovered over the keyboard, wrestling with the decision to send a message that could either solidify his partnership or deepen his rivalry. The glow of the screen illuminated the tumultuous conflict brewing within him. Should he embrace the collaboration, or guard his creative soul against potential betrayal? The tension inside him burgeoned, a powerful force drawing him towards a crossroads. It was time to confront not only his rival but the doubts he had long clung to. Clint took a deep breath, his thoughts crystallizing around his core narrative. This journey was not merely about him, but about all who wielded creativity against the grain of conformity. He no longer wanted to be shackled by comparison. It was time to declare ownership over his voice and step forward into the light of collaboration. He tapped on the screen, sending off a message to his colleague affirming their partnership while inviting them to further refine their narrative. While the anticipation of their collaboration stirred excitement, an undeniable nagging voice warned him of the rival waiting just outside the fringes. With this newfound resolve, he made another choice: to reach out to his rival. Clint crafted an email, one rooted in respect despite the tension that had previously existed. "Hello, rival's name," he typed. I hope this message finds you well. I wanted to touch base about an idea I'm developing and would appreciate your voice in the process. Collaboration can lead to exciting revelations, and I believe your perspective could enrich the narrative. This act of vulnerability felt like removing the protective armor he had worn for too long. He wanted to redefine the boundaries of their relationship, not as competitors, but as fellow artists navigating a challenging industry. As he hit send, a wave of exhilaration washed over him. The fears of inadequacy eventually morphed into a sense of courage. In the days that followed, Clint boarded the train of collaboration with newfound clarity. Each meeting with his colleagues spiraled their project into form, a blend of authentic storytelling with commercial viability that would resonate with audiences. Each idea inflamed his passion as they crafted characters, vignettes woven from societal struggles, and intertwined themes of aspiration. He understood now that this narrative was not solely his. It belonged to an entire community, a chorus of voices that rang true against the silence of self-doubt. Each session with his collaborator illuminated his artistic vision, molding it while retaining the essence that had incited his journey. During this period of creative growth, the message from his rival finally came, an invitation to meet. Clint's stomach nodded, but he walked into that meeting armed with confidence, his awareness ignited by the notion of artistic camaraderie. As they exchanged pleasantries, Clint felt an authentic shift in their dialogue. Opening with mutual respect transformed their interactions, and before he knew it, they were conversational architects, shaping the framework of ideas rather than adversaries. What had once been a battlefield morphed into a vibrant exchange of thought. Clint was astonished to witness the possibility forge its own path. Their rivalry slowly softened into mutual acknowledgement of their respective journeys. In that instance, the barriers he had erected crumbled, revealing clarity in both himself and his rival. Recognizing each other's struggles debunked the myths of comparison and competition. They coalesced into a unity, someone to respect rather than overshadow. With their narratives tied, Clint embarked on presenting their joint project to potential producers, though no longer shrouded in anxiety. Instead, he was buoyed by the confidence of collective effort. As the audience settled into the theater, Clint's heart raced, not with trepidation but excitement. The screening went beyond expectation. Their characters danced on screen, authentic and raw, breaths held in anticipation by an audience captivated by reflective realism. The applause echoed through the room, filling Clint with unparalleled elation. Every clap signified a mission accomplished, not of mere commercial success but proof that authenticity spoke louder than the shadows of doubt. As he stepped onto that stage, the complexity of the journey crystallized, an affirmation of his evolution, a fierce acknowledgement of growth, resilience, and genuine artistry. Clint beamed, feeling the applause not as an end, but as an embrace into a new chapter. This moment wasn't merely fictional victory, it was the metamorphosis from fear to freedom, asserting not just a story, but the heart of every storyteller. Clint, once paralyzed by doubt, was now the champion of a narrative boldly woven through the tapestry of shared dreams. It was time for the next leap, to create more stories, more connections, and to celebrate the shared art of storytelling, that unyielding force, capable of forging paths through fear and into fulfillment. Don't wait even one more second to share this transformative journey. You need to subscribe now to the channel to follow more exclusive emotional stories that inspire growth and change. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and support the narrative of overcoming adversity. Comment your reactions and theories about Clint's remarkable journey. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion, lifting each other through the power of storytelling and creativity. Your support is essential in spreading these transformative tales.